You can feel it. When they enter into the room, the air changes and the vibe shifts. Something within you tightens, like an alarm sounding in the depths of your being. Toxic people have a way of draining your life force, making you question your worth, ability, and inner serenity. But here's the truth. Sensible people don't allow poisonous people run their life. They do not allow negativity to control their emotions. They don't give up their power. Instead, they master the art of dealing with toxic individuals, preserving their energy, and emerging stronger than before. And today I will show you exactly how they do it. Toxic people don't play fairly. They mislead, deceive, and distort reality to further their own goals. Their words are carefully picked weapons, and their behaviors are a calculated dance meant to keep you off balance. They push you just enough to make you uncomfortable, but not far enough to make you walk away, at least not right now. Most people fall into this trap. They believe they are dealing with someone reasonable, someone who can be reasoned with, and who with enough love or patience will finally realize the folly of their ways. But this isn't how it works. Toxic individuals thrive on confusion. They create drama, then pretend like they're the victims. They insult you and then tell you that you're overreacting. They break promises and then make you feel bad for expecting them to keep their word. They see it as a game, and if you don't understand the rules, you'll always lose. They recognize toxic conduct for what it is, a cycle, a pattern, and a predictable set of control strategies. Manipulate and drain energy from others around you. And because they know the game, they refuse to play it. They are not caught in prolonged conversations in which the poisonous person constantly shifts the goalposts. They don't waste time trying to prove their importance to someone who is determined to make them feel insignificant. They refuse to be sucked into the emotional roller coaster of guilt, rage, and self-doubt that toxic people are known for instilling. Instead, they remain tranquil. They notice and remain aware. Awareness is the first and most effective step in coping with toxicity because it allows you to separate from the emotional turmoil. Consider someone attempting to agitate you by hitting buttons that they know will irritate you. If you reacted, they win. They feel in control when you become furious, weep, or defend yourself excessively. However, if you take a step back and observe rather than interact, they quickly lose strength. They cannot manipulate you if you are unwilling to be manipulated. They cannot confuse you if you refuse to be confused. Smart people exercise detachment. They see through the mental games and refuse to take the bait. They remind themselves that when someone tries to make them feel inferior, it reveals more about the other person's issues than their own. So they don't take things personally, since they recognize that poisonous behavior never targets them. It is about the toxic person's unresolved concerns, phobias, and desire for control. This is not to say that they ignore or deny the existence of harmful behavior. They accept it, name it what it is, but do not allow it to overwhelm them. They don't waste time pondering why they're like this, or what have I done to deserve this. They understand that some people are simply committed to disorder. They recognize that no amount of love, patience, or explanation will change someone who is determined to be toxic. So they take a different strategy. Instead of reacting emotionally, they respond clearly. They avoid unneeded arguments by communicating directly and unemotionally. When a toxic person attempts to guilt-trip someone, they do not explain themselves indefinitely or seek acceptance. They simply say the facts and move on. When a toxic person attempts to twist their statements, they do not expend energy defending themselves against distortions. They understand the manipulation and refuse to cooperate. Toxic individuals thrive on confusion, but sensible people make things very obvious. They are firm in their words, robust in their acts, and unfazed by emotional manipulation. They resist gaslighting because they believe in their own view of reality. They refuse to let toxic people rule the narrative of who they are because they understand their worth. The most effective response to a toxic individual is not rage or vengeance. It's indifference. When they notice that their normal tactics are no longer working and that they can no longer draw you into their drama, they begin to lose interest. Toxic people require emotional responses to motivate their activity. When you quit feeding that fuel, their power over you diminishes. This is why recognizing the game is so important. When you see through the deception, control, and emotional traps, you are free. The poisonous person may not change, but they will lose control over you, which is how you reclaim your power. Toxic individuals thrive when boundaries are weak. They push, test, and manipulate. If you give them an inch, they will take a mile. They are skilled at detecting and exploiting flaws in your willpower. One day they cross a minor line and you ignore it. The next day they push a little more and you're confused whether to confront them. Before you realize it, your life is consumed by their drama, negativity, and confusion. This is how they function. They do not break through your doors with evident anger. They sneak in gradually, destroying your sense of control. Smart individuals do not tolerate such behavior. They establish solid, unbreakable limits and enforce them without guilt. They do not wait till the toxicity has destroyed their calm. They stop it before it takes root. They recognize that setting limits is about protecting themselves rather than dominating others. They don't apologize for requiring space to say no or for prioritizing their mental health over someone else's needs. They understand that not everyone gets unrestricted access to their energy, time, and emotions. Toxic people will always push limits. When you start setting boundaries, they will push back. They will make you feel guilty, accuse you of being selfish, or portray you as the victim. They might say something like, "You've changed. Why are you behaving like this?" Or, "I assumed you cared about me." They understand exactly which emotional buttons to push to make you doubt yourself. Smart individuals do not fall for this deception. They do not let guilt guide their judgments. They tell themselves that toxic individuals profit from feeling guilty because it makes them more manageable. The most typical method toxic people cross boundaries is through emotional manipulation. They may accuse you of being a victim or use rage to force you to comply. Smart people understand these approaches and refuse to participate. They do not explain themselves indefinitely. They do not negotiate their borders. They do not allow toxic people to pervert their words or make them feel like the problem. Instead, they openly state and adhere to their bounds. If they say no, they really mean it. If they indicate they will not accept certain behaviors, they follow through. There is no place for discomfort. Managing the discomfort that comes with setting limits is one of the most difficult aspects of the process. Many people struggle to say no because they are afraid of being rejected or upsetting others. Toxic people detect this dread and take advantage of it. They rely on your discomfort to continue pushing their boundaries. However, astute people see that transient discomfort is far preferable to long-term misery. They accept that some people will be offended, that some relationships will alter, and that not everyone will like their boundaries. And they are content with that. Boundaries are more than simply saying no to others. They also emphasize saying yes to yourself. When you set solid boundaries, you make room for calm, growth, and connections that nourish rather than drain you. You no longer feel forced to tolerate mistreatment merely to keep the peace. You begin to value your own well-being more than the demands of others. You learn to select yourself rather than continuously attempting to please others. This transformation distinguishes individuals who stay bound in harmful cycles from those who break free. Enforcing boundaries is not always simple. Toxic people will put you to the test. They'll push back harder the first few times you hold firm. However, the key is consistency. If you let them know that your limits are negotiable, they will be able to break you down with enough pressure. Smart individuals do not tolerate such behavior. They remain steady regardless of how uncomfortable things get. They recognize that when they maintain their limits, they increase their sense of self-worth. Another effective part of boundary setting is learning to disconnect. Not all battles are worth fighting. Toxic people enjoy dragging you into pointless drama, arguing and making you prove your value over and over again. But astute people understand that the strongest response is often silence. They do not waste time explaining, justifying, or defending themselves to people who are determined to misunderstand them. They set their boundaries, and if they are not respected, they leave the situation. They realize that sometimes walking away is the most forceful message they can make. Toxic people don't naturally respect limits. They must be taught. And the only way to do so is to consistently enforce your limits. If you tell children you won't tolerate certain actions but continue to make exceptions, they'll never believe you. If you allow them to cross lines repeatedly, they will believe your boundaries are malleable. But if you stand firm and refuse to sacrifice your well-being, they will soon discover they can't control you. Setting boundaries does not mean shutting people out. It's about defending what's most important: your serenity, energy, and self-esteem. It expresses that you value yourself enough to demand better. It's an act of self-love, a statement that you will no longer tolerate anything that saps your soul or dims your light. And when toxic people realize they no longer have control over you, that you are no longer vulnerable to their manipulation, they lose power, because at the end of the day, the only way to truly win against toxicity is to refuse to play their game. Toxic individuals thrive on emotional responses. They push buttons, causing insecurities, manipulate situations to elicit a response. They thrive on drama and disorder, utilizing them to maintain control over others. They feel strong when they can elicit wrath, frustration, or self-doubt from others. The more reactive you are, the greater their grip over your emotions. This is why intelligent people don't give them what they want. They refuse to let someone else's negativity control their feelings. They recognize that maintaining emotional control is essential for countering the effect of toxic individuals. When dealing with a toxic individual, it is easy to fall into the trap of reacting quickly. They may attack you gently, make passive hostile remarks, or pervert your words. They may try to guilt-trip you into playing the victim or causing unnecessary conflict. The natural urge is to defend yourself, show them wrong, and engage in a verbal battle. Engaging emotionally merely provides them with more ammunition. The more you respond, the more they alter the issue to make you appear insane. Smart individuals recognize this game and refuse to play it. Rather than reacting, they pause. Before answering, they take a mental pause to examine the circumstance. They remind themselves that toxic individuals do not argue in good faith. They argue for control. They remain calm regardless of how much the poisonous person attempts to agitate them. When a toxic person realizes that typical tactics aren't working, they frequently escalate their conduct. They will attempt harder to elicit a response. They'll say things that make you feel guilty, secure, or enraged. They will bring up the past, twist your words, and even attempt to turn people against you. They are searching for an emotional outburst because it gives them control. But when they witness one, they remain calm. Their comments have lost their force and no longer have any effect on you. Smart individuals recognize that nothing bothers a poisonous person more than someone who refuses to be emotionally dominated. Detachment is one of the most successful strategies for maintaining emotional control. Instead of personalizing poisonous conduct, savvy people remind themselves that the problem is not theirs, it is with the harmful individual. They do not let someone else's words or actions determine their self-worth. They don't take insults personally. They don't waste time attempting to get approval from someone who is out to undermine them. They emotionally distance themselves from the poisonous person's actions, refusing to allow it to disturb their peace. This distance does not imply indifference. It is about self-defense. Toxic people prefer to generate a sense of urgency. They want you to respond in the heat of the moment, to make rash judgments and say things you might regret. However, smart people do not follow the emotional chronology of others. They take their time. They digest their feelings in private before responding. They do not let a poisonous person's eagerness to cause them to behave or speak in haste. They keep control by slowing things down and refuse to be hurried into emotional responses. Another way clever individuals keep emotional control is to pick their battles intelligently. Not all comments warrant a response. Not every insult should be handled. Toxic people attempt to bait. Others' continuous disputes exhaust them emotionally. Smart people identify pointless conversations and disengage. They recognize that their time is too valuable to be squandered on someone who has no intention of listening or comprehending. They devote their energy to things that are genuinely important, rather than getting caught up in little fights designed to tire them. When dealing with toxic people, self-awareness is an extremely effective strategy. Smart people recognize their own emotional triggers. They are aware of the types of words or behaviors that are likely to provoke them and plan accordingly. They build emotional resilience so that when a toxic person attempts to manipulate them, they are unaffected. This self-awareness enables individuals to break away from previous emotional patterns, stopping them from falling into the same traps time and again. Toxic people prefer to see you lose control because it makes them feel strong. However, by remaining calm and refusing to react emotionally, you reduce their power. They cannot control someone who does not react. They cannot dominate someone who refuses to play their psychological games. When you control your emotions, you become untouchable. When you become untouchable, toxic people recognize they can no longer exploit you for their own gain. They begin to lose interest because without emotional reactions to feed on, they have nothing to control. Toxic individuals hate losing control. They mislead, distort, and twist reality to keep people in a state of emotional distress. When they see you drifting away, they panic and try to draw you back in with guilt, fury, or fake friendliness. They will suddenly act concerned, as if they have changed, or as if you are being unfair. But intelligent people do not fall for this. They recognize that true power entails not only recognizing poisonous behavior, but also having the fortitude to walk away. Never look back. Walking away from a toxic individual is more than a physical act. It is also a mental and emotional decision. It is choosing to no longer participate in their manipulative games. It's refusing to engage, refusing to explain, and refusing to be dragged back into their maelstrom. It is cutting off the emotional source that keeps them coming back. Toxic people thrive on reaction, interaction, and knowing they still have access to your thoughts. When you walk away, totally go silent and stop feeding their want for attention, you deprive them of their power. One of the most difficult problems people confront while attempting to walk away is guilt. Toxic people excel at making you feel like you owe them something. They remind you of wonderful times. They behave like they're the victim. They immediately show affection or apologize. They make you reconsider your decision. They make you worry if you are being overly harsh. However, clever people do not allow guilt to deceive them into remaining in poisonous settings. They remind themselves that just because someone desires access to them does not imply that they deserve it. They recognize that another person's sentiments are not more essential than their own peace. Toxic people frequently create the illusion of dependency. They act as if they can't live without you, as if you're the only person who understands them, and as if abandoning them would be terrible. Smart people, however, can see through this emotional manipulation. They understand that it is not their responsibility to correct, save, or carry a person who refuses to accept responsibility for their acts. They see that staying in a poisonous circumstance out of guilt is not compassionate, it is self-sacrifice, and they are unwilling to burn themselves on fire to keep someone warm. Toxic people will also try to provoke a reaction in order to keep you from leaving them. When kindness and guilt do not work, they will resort to rage, threats, or blame. They'll insult you, attempt to harm your reputation, or make you feel like you are the problem. They will tell lies, twist the truth, and even attempt to turn people against you. They want to entice you back in with emotional upheavers. However, sensible individuals do not react. They do not engage unneeded battles. They do not waste time attempting to prove themselves to individuals who are determined to misunderstand them. They let go. They believe that the truth will emerge over time. Silence is one of the most powerful weapons against toxicity, and toxic individuals expect to fight. They anticipate lengthy explanations, emotional breakdowns, and frantic efforts to reason with them. However, when met with silence, they feel powerless. Smart people understand that being silent is not a sign of weakness. It is about control. It refuses to be drawn into another cycle of manipulation. It prioritizes peace over avoidable strife. It establishes such a strong boundary that poisonous people are forced to leave. Walking away does not imply that you don't care. It doesn't imply you didn't try. It indicates you love yourself enough to quit letting someone else's negativity drain you. It indicates you're choosing to protect your energy, concentrate on your own development, and surround yourself with individuals who inspire rather than destroy. It means you recognize that not everyone deserves a place in your life, and that letting go is sometimes the best option. Toxic people are never willing to let go of someone they can control. However, when you demonstrate that you are no longer available for their mind games by walking away and never looking back, they are left with no alternative. They may try to replace you or make you regret your decision, but deep down they will know they have lost control, and that is what truly breaks them. Since toxic people do not fear being alone. They fear losing their capacity to influence, control, and drain the energy of others. And when you walk away permanently, you take everything away from them. Healing from toxic individuals is more than just moving on. It's about regaining your sense of self. Toxic relationships, whether with a friend, family member, or spouse, have a negative impact on your emotional and mental health. They alter your image of oneself and cause you to question your worth, and leave scars that might last long after the toxic individual is gone. Smart individuals understand that eliminating poison is only the first step. True freedom comes from healing, rebuilding, and learning how to keep the peace moving ahead. Self-reflection is an essential aspect of the healing process. Toxic individuals frequently make their victims feel accountable for the turmoil they cause. They distort reality, blame others for their behavior, and make you question yourself. Walking away from a toxic individual does not immediately remove your self-doubt. It takes time to reverse the harm. Smart folks make use of that time. They think about what they tolerated, why they tolerated it, and what patterns they need to break to avoid falling into the same trap again. They do not linger on and blame themselves or the poisonous person. Instead, they view the event as a learning opportunity. They use what they've learned and apply it to become stronger. Healing also entails restoring confidence. Toxic people have the ability to make others feel small, helpless, or unworthy. They manipulate through criticism, subtle insults, and mind games that gradually erode self-esteem. Even when they leave, their words and actions can stay in your mind, causing you to doubt yourself long after the relationship has finished. Smart people seek to undo the damage. They deliberately restore their confidence by surrounding themselves with optimism, concentrating on their abilities, and reminding themselves that they are greater than the trauma they have endured. They comprehend that the toxic individual has never defined their worth. It was always there, ready to be rediscovered. Learning to trust again is an important aspect of the healing journey. Toxic relationships frequently leave people feeling guarded, unwilling to open up, and cautious to trust others. They elicit fear of getting wounded again, of being deceived, or of making the same mistakes. Smart people do not let their fear govern them. They accept it, but it does not control their future. They take their time, establish firmer limits, and learn to distinguish between those who boost and those who drain. They do not hold fresh, healthy relationships accountable for the harm produced by poisonous ones. Instead, they harness their past experiences to foster better, more fulfilling relationships. Part of the healing process entails altering your internal dialogue. Toxic people instill unpleasant thoughts in your head, which can last long after they are gone. They make you believe you are not good enough, that you do not deserve pleasure, and that you are incapable of standing on your own. Smart individuals understand these notions for what they are, lies. They deliberately seek to reprogram their mindset. They replace self-doubt with self-belief, and negativity with appreciation and fear. They remind themselves every day that they are in control of their own narrative, not the poisonous individual who attempted to bring them down. Letting go of resentment is also essential to healing. It's easy to be angry, repeat past discussions, and dwell on all the ways you've been wronged. Resentment merely connects you to the toxin. It keeps you emotionally connected to someone who no longer belongs in your life. Smart people recognize that forgiveness does not excuse. It is about liberating themselves from the weight of it. They let go not for the benefit of the toxic person, but for their own calm. They refuse to take anger into the future. They choose peace over vengeance, healing over holding on, and progress over remaining caught in the past misery. Self-care becomes a priority during the healing process. Toxic relationships deplete people's vitality, leaving them psychologically, emotionally, and physically drained. Smart people understand the necessity of recovering their health. They engage in activities that make them happy, refresh their spirits, and remind them of who they were before the toxicity entered their lives. They make self-care a priority, whether it's reading, exercising, spending time in nature, meditating, or simply resting without guilt. They recognize that healing is more than just removing toxins. It is also about replacing them with positivity and purpose. The ultimate stage of recovery is to adopt a new attitude, in which peace is prioritized, boundaries are unshakable, and toxic people have no place. Smart people come out of the mending process stronger than before. They gain self-awareness and confidence and intentionality, in who they accept into their lives. They will no longer tolerate manipulation, rudeness, or hostility. They recognize that mending is more than simply moving on. It's about being someone who will never accept less than they deserve again. That is the ultimate victory over poison. Not only fleeing, but thriving beyond it. Keeping your peace does not just entail removing poisonous people. It is about building a life in which negativity cannot thrive. It entails being deliberate about who enters your space, what kind of energy you accept, and how you deal with external negativity. Smart people don't simply avoid harmful situations. They form a protective barrier around themselves to prevent poison from entering again. They accept complete responsibility for their emotional well-being and foster an environment in which serenity, progress, and positivity become the bedrock of their existence. Setting clear limits is one of the most effective methods to maintain harmony. Toxic individuals flourish in circumstances where boundaries are weak or non-existent. They push the limits, test patience, and manipulate their way into your space. Smart people, on the other hand, recognize that setting clear lines is necessary for defending their peace. They decide what behaviors they will and will not tolerate. They refuse to interact with people who deplete their energy, continually whine, or cause unnecessary drama. They make no apologies for terminating conversations, relationships, or settings that disrupt their state of calm. They remain steadfast in their decisions, understanding that peace is a choice that must be safeguarded every day. Another way wise people keep their cool is by managing their emotions. They understand that they cannot control how others behave, but they can always control how they react. When confronted with negativity, they avoid pointless battles or wasting energy attempting to persuade individuals who are determined to misunderstand them. They prefer silence to debates, intellect to emotions, and distance over unneeded confrontation. They understand that every reaction is a decision, and they refuse to devote their energy to those who thrive on conflict. By mastering their responses, they preserve their inner world from outward chaos. Protecting peace also entails being aware of your surroundings, the people you associate with, the information you ingest, and the energy you allow into your space. All influence your mental and emotional state. Smart people meticulously arrange their surroundings to reflect the way they desire to live. They shun gossip, criticism, and harmful interactions. They unfollow social media profiles that cause tension, anxiety, or comparison. They ensure that their surroundings motivate and excite them rather than exhaust them. They recognize that peace is more than just avoiding negativity. It is actively building an environment that promotes growth, happiness, and stability. Self-awareness is key to keeping tranquility. Smart people take the time to think about their emotions, triggers, and boundaries. They do not disregard or suppress their emotions. They acknowledge and confront them in a healthy manner. They practice self-regulation, which keeps their inner environment peaceful even when external conditions become chaotic. They recognize that peace is an inner job and that no external force has the authority to destroy it unless they allow it. They take responsibility for their mental health by prioritizing self-care, meditation, or any other practice that keeps them grounded. Protecting serenity involves learning to let go. Holding on to previous grief, grudges, or resentments just perpetuates harmful energy in your head. Smart people don't waste time rehashing terrible events or carrying emotional baggage that is no longer useful to them. They recognize that tranquility comes from embracing what has occurred, learning from it, and moving forward without bitterness. They choose forgiveness not for the benefit of the toxic individual, but for their own liberation. They let go of previous hurts to make way for new chances, joy, and personal development. Choosing your battles carefully is an important part of keeping peace. Not every scenario warrants a response, and not every unpleasant individual deserves your attention. Smart people do not waste energy on small fights or those who add unnecessary drama to their life. They know when to move away, disengage, and remain mute. They focus their attention and resources on things that are genuinely important rather than getting caught up in needless fights or situations that do not contribute to their advancement. Finally, sensible people keep their peace by making deliberate decisions about how to spend their time. They do not let harmful relationships, unfulfilling commitments, or exhausting activities deplete their vitality. They prioritize personal development, meaningful connections, and activities that make them happy and fulfilled. They understand that time is the most valuable item they have, and they refuse to waste it on anything that jeopardizes their health. They invest in themselves, pursue their passions, and create a life in which peace is the norm, not the exception. Toxic people do not hold positions of power. You do. You have the power to control who has access to your life. You have the ability to set boundaries that protect your peace. You have the ability to maintain emotional control. Focus on personal development and let go of everything that no longer benefits you. This is how clever people handle poisonous individuals. They do not fight, plead, or lose themselves in the commotion. They soar above it, they regain their power, they continue to grow stronger, wiser, and freer than ever before.